Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling habits.
Habits.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at Atomic Habits
Okay.
by James Clear. We're going to be exploring some really interesting questions like why do tiny changes make
Interesting.
such a big difference over time? Is there some secret formula for
Mm.
building better habits? And why is it easier to build new habits in a new environment?
Like when you move or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you move or you start a new job or something.
Like a
And
fresh start.
yeah, it's like a clean slate.
I've always wondered about that.
Me too. So yeah, we're going to unpack all of that and more in this deep dive.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Me too. So James Clear's Atomic Habits,
Mm.
it's all about the science of tiny changes
Right.
and how those can lead to remarkable results. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it's not just theory. He actually uses a ton of real life examples,
Oh yeah.
like from his own life and from other successful people.
That's cool. I always find it more relatable when there are stories involved.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of stories,
Yeah.
one thing that really stuck with me was James Clear's own story about recovering from that baseball injury.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy.
I know, right? Like multiple fractures, seizures. It sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah, it's amazing he even recovered at all.
I know. And then he went on to become like an academic All-American, build successful business, and write a best-selling book.
Talk about resilience.
Seriously. And that's where his fascination with the power of tiny gains began, right?
He realized that even though he couldn't do everything he used to do,
Right.
he could still take small, consistent actions that would add up over time.
And that's what he calls atomic habits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Small changes that compound over time.
Okay, so you've got these tiny changes that can snowball into big wins.
Mm-hmm.
But how does this tie into the idea of lagging measures that Clear talks about?
Oh, yeah. Lagging measures are basically the results that you see
Okay.
long after you've put in the work.
Mhm.
It's like you don't see the effects immediately.
Ah.
So, for example, your bank account balance. That reflects your financial habits from weeks or even months ago.
Right.
It's not like you spend money today and your balance instantly updates.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or think about your weight.
Yeah.
That reflects your eating and exercise habits over time,
Okay. Yeah.
not just what you ate for lunch today.
So it's like a delayed reaction almost.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be patient and consistent with your habits.
Right, because you might not see the results right away.
Yeah, you might feel like you're not making progress, but if you stick with it,
Mm-hmm.
those tiny changes will eventually add up.
So it's all about playing the long game.
Exactly.
I like that.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got tiny changes, we've got lagging measures.
Mhm.
But what about those times when you're putting in the work,
Yeah.
but you feel like you're hitting a wall, like you're not making any progress?
Oh, yeah. Clear calls that the plateau of latent potential.
The plateau of latent potential.
It's a mouthful, I know.
It is a bit of a mouthful.
But it basically means that you're putting in the effort, but you're not seeing the results yet.
Like you're stuck in a rut.
Yeah, kind of. Like you're on a treadmill going nowhere.
But the effort's still there.
Yeah, the effort's there,
Yeah.
but it's like those lagging measures you were talking about.
Right.
The results just haven't caught up yet.
So how do we push past that plateau? How do we make sure we're not just spinning our wheels?
Well, Clear uses a really great analogy to explain this.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about heating an ice cube.
Okay.
You apply heat to the ice cube,
Mm-hmm.
but for a while, nothing seems to happen.
It's still an ice cube.
Right, it's still an ice cube, but then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
boom, the ice melts.
Okay, so it's like a tipping point.
Exactly. And the same thing happens with our habits.
So even though we don't see the results immediately,
Mm-hmm.
our efforts are still accumulating beneath the surface.
Right, it's like we're building up potential energy.
And then eventually that energy is released and we see a breakthrough.
That's a great way to put it.
So we need to trust the process and be patient.
Yeah, patience is key.
But where do we even begin? Like habits can feel so automatic sometimes.
Right, it's like we're just running on autopilot.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we become more aware of our habits?
Well, that's where understanding the 4 stages of a habit comes in.
Okay, tell me more.
So Clear breaks down habits into this 4-step loop.
A loop.
Okay.
Yeah.
First, there's a cue,
A cue.
which could be anything, really.
Like what?
Like a specific time of day, a certain location, a particular emotion.
Ah, okay.
And that cue triggers a craving.
A craving for what?
A craving for a reward. So, for example,
Wow.
if you see a notification on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
that might trigger a craving to check your messages.
Right, because you're anticipating a reward, like a funny meme or something.
Exactly. And then that craving leads to a response,
Which is?
the actual habit itself. So in this case, you pick up your phone and check your messages.
Okay, so the response is the action,
Yeah, and then finally you get the reward.
which reinforces the entire cycle.
Right. So in this case, the reward might be seeing a funny meme or getting a message from a friend.
And then the next time you see a notification on your phone,
You're more likely to repeat the cycle.
because you've associated that cue with a reward.
Exactly.
It's like our brains are wired for this kind of reward-based learning,
That's right.
and that's how habits become so ingrained.
Yeah. Even if we're not aware of it.
It's like we're just going through the motions.
Yeah, like robots almost.
And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the habit.
Definitely. If it's a good habit, then it's great that it's automatic.
Right, like brushing your teeth or putting on your seatbelt,
Yeah. But if it's a bad habit,
like scrolling through social media for hours,
then it can be really hard to break.
because it's become so deeply ingrained in our brains.
Right. But the good news is,
Yeah.
once we understand how habits work, we can start to change them.
So it's not just about willpower or motivation.
No, it's about understanding the science behind habits.
And using that knowledge to our advantage.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually start to change our habits?
Well, the first step is to become more aware of them,
Oh, okay.
which is where the habit scorecard comes in.
The habit scorecard, what is that?
It's a tool that Clio recommends for tracking your habits.
Okay, so like a habit journal or something.
Kind of. It's basically a list of all the things you do on a daily basis,
Okay.
and you go through and label each habit as positive, negative, or neutral.
So it's like taking inventory of your habits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a really eye-opening exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Because you might be surprised by how many things you do on autopilot.
Without even realizing it.
Right, like you might not even realize how often you check your phone.
Or how much time you spend watching TV.
Yeah, things like that.
So by tracking our habits, we become more aware of them.
Exactly. And once you're aware of your habits, you can start to make changes.
So it's like shining a light on those unconscious behaviors.
Yeah, it's like bringing them into the conscious mind.
So we can start to make deliberate choices about them.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm getting this picture of a Japanese train conductor.
A Japanese train conductor.
Yeah, I read somewhere that they use this technique called pointing and calling.
Pointing and calling.
Yeah, where they physically point at something and call out what they're doing.
Oh, wow.
Like signal is green or doors are closing.
Interesting.
And it's supposed to help them stay focused and avoid mistakes.
Makes sense.
So it's like they're bringing conscious awareness to every action.
Yeah, it's like they're forcing their brains to pay attention.
Exactly. And I think we can apply that same level of intentionality to our own habits.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
So instead of just going through the motions
We could be more mindful of what we're doing.
and why we're doing it.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's awareness.
The first step to change.
But what comes next? How do we actually start to build better habits?
Well, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive.
Where we'll explore some strategies for making those good habits stick.
It's going to be great.
I'm excited.
Me too. Welcome back. I'm so ready to get into actually making these habits stick.
Yeah, me too. Like, how do we actually make those good habits stick?
Right.
It's one thing to start a new habit, but how do we keep that momentum going?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. Like, how do we avoid those dreaded plateaus?
Where it feels like you're just spinning your wheels.
Exactly. And I feel like we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like you start with all this energy and enthusiasm,
Yeah.
and then a few weeks later, you're back to your old ways.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's so frustrating.
It is. So what's the secret?
Well, it's definitely not about finding the perfect habit
Okay.
that you're magically obsessed with.
Right. It's not like there's this one magic habit out there
Yeah.
that's going to solve all our problems.
No, it's not about that.
So what is it about?
Well, one thing that Clear emphasizes is the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule?
Have you heard of that?
I think so. Remind me.
Yeah, so it's this idea that we're most motivated
Okay.
when we're working on tasks that are just the right level of challenge.
Oh, okay.
Not too easy, not too hard.
Like the porridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course. You want it to be just right.
So we don't get bored, but we also don't get overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we find that Goldilocks zone for our habits?
Well, it takes a bit of experimentation
Okay.
and self-awareness.
So like trial and error?
Kind of.
Yep.
Yeah, think of it like learning a new skill.
Okay.
You wouldn't expect to be like a concert pianist
Right.
the first time you sit down at a piano.
No way.
Got to start with the basics.
The scales and all that.
Yeah. And then you gradually increase the difficulty.
As you get better.
Exactly. And it's the same with habits.
So instead of trying to overhaul our entire lives overnight,
Right.
we start with small, manageable changes
Yeah. And then you slowly raise the bar.
as you get more comfortable.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we find that sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's still the issue of boredom, right?
Ugh, yes, boredom.
Like habits can get repetitive.
That's the nature of habits.
Yeah. So how do we combat that?
How do we stay engaged?
Yeah. Like over the long haul.
Well, Clear actually argues that boredom,
Okay.
not failure, is the biggest threat to success.
Really? Boredom is more dangerous than failure.
Yeah. He says that most people don't fail because they lack ability.
Mm-hmm.
They fail because they get bored.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And he also challenges this idea
Yeah.
that you need to be like super passionate about something to stick with it.
Oh.
Really? So it's not about finding your one true calling.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
He says that a lot of successful people aren't necessarily passionate about what they do.
Okay.
They're just really good at sticking to a schedule.
So it's more about discipline than passion.
In a way, yeah. Like they're able to show up
Okay.
and do the work.
Even when they don't feel like it.
Exactly. Even when it's boring.
So how do we cultivate that kind of discipline?
Well, one thing Clear suggests is to focus on the process.
Not just the product.
So, like, enjoy the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, don't just focus on the end goal.
Okay.
Find a way to enjoy the steps along the way.
So if you're writing a book,
Yeah,
don't just focus on finishing the book.
right?
Enjoy the act of writing,
Exactly. And that'll make it more likely that you'll stick with it.
even when it gets tough.
Right.
Okay, so focus on the process, not the product. Any other tips for staying motivated?
Another thing Clear talks about is the importance of immediate rewards.
Immediate reward.
Yeah, our brains love instant gratification.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So one way to make habits more appealing
Yeah.
is to pair them with something you enjoy.
Okay, I like that.
So for example,
Yeah.
maybe you only allow yourself to watch your favorite TV show
Okay.
while you're working out.
So you're associating something you enjoy
Mm-hmm.
with something you might not enjoy as much.
Exactly.
That's clever.
Or maybe you only listen to your favorite podcast while you're doing the dishes.
I could get behind that.
Yeah. It's all about making those habits more enjoyable.
So you're more likely to stick with them.
Exactly.
Okay. What else?
Well, another really effective strategy is habit tracking.
Habit trapping
Yeah. Like keeping a journal or using an app.
to track your progress.
Exactly. And there's something really powerful
Yeah.
about visually seeing your progress.
Like checking things off a list.
Yeah. It just feels good.
It does. Like you're making progress.
Exactly. And it also helps you stay accountable.
Because you can see if you're falling off track.
Right.
Okay, so we've got immediate rewards, we've got habit tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Any other tips for making those habits stick?
Well, one more thing I wanted to mention
Yeah.
is the idea of a habit contract.
Habit contract.
Yeah. It's basically a written agreement
Okay.
where you outline your goal,
Mm-hmm.
the specific actions you're going to take,
Okay.
and the consequences.
Or not following through.
Exactly. And you share this contract.
With someone you trust.
Yeah. Like an accountability partner.
So they can hold you to it.
Right.
Wow, so it's like adding an extra layer of accountability.
Exactly. And
Oh.
it can be really effective.
Because you're not just accountable to yourself.
You're accountable to someone else.
And Clear even suggests incorporating financial incentives.
Oh, yeah.
Like donating to a cause you dislike
Wow.
if you don't reach your goal.
That's commitment.
It is, but it shows how serious he is
Yeah.
about making habits stick.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From tiny changes to the Goldilocks rule to habit contracts.
It's been a journey.
It really has. And in the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we're going to explore how our identity,
Our identity.
yeah, like our beliefs about ourselves,
Interesting.
plays a crucial role in shaping our habits.
I'm intrigued.
Me too.
Yeah.
This is where things get really interesting.
I can't wait.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive on atomic habits.
I'm excited to finish this up.
Me too. So in the last two parts, we've talked about all those practical tips for building better habits.
Like the Goldilocks rule.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
habit tracking and all that.
Mm.
But now we're getting to the really juicy stuff.
The juicy stuff.
Yeah. Like how our identity actually plays a role in shaping our habits.
Okay. Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
It does. So Clear argues that true behavior change is about changing our beliefs about who we are.
So it's not just about changing our actions.
It's about changing our identity.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like a deeper level of change.
I see.
So it's not just about like setting a goal to exercise more.
Okay.
It's about becoming the kind of person who prioritizes their health.
So it's like an internal shift.
Exactly. And Clear says this really powerful thing.
What's that?
He says, your behaviors are usually a reflection of your identity.
That's deep.
I know, right? And what he means is that what
Yeah.
you do consistently reflects the kind of person you believe you are.
Whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, like if you see yourself as a healthy person,
Mm-hmm.
you're naturally going to make choices that support that image.
But if you see yourself as someone who's lazy or undisciplined,
Hmm.
then you're more likely to fall back into those patterns.
Right.
And this works both ways.
How so?
Like, your habits shape your identity,
Okay.
but your identity also shapes your habits.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. A continuous feedback loop.
And we can use that to our advantage.
Exactly.
So how do we actually change our identity?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Awareness again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we need to identify those beliefs that might be holding us back.
Okay.
And Clear talks about how, as we grow and evolve,
Mm-hmm.
those same beliefs that once helped us
Right.
can sometimes turn into a kind of pride.
Pride.
Yeah. Like a pride that prevents further growth. Like, we get attached to a certain image of ourselves and we resist change.
Because it threatens that image.
Exactly.
So how do we break free from those limiting beliefs? Well, Clear suggests that instead of trying to change your beliefs directly,
Okay.
focus on changing your system.
My system.
Yeah, like your environment and the habits you practice.
Okay.
So design a system that naturally guides you towards the person you want to become.
That makes sense.
So if you want to be a writer, don't wait for inspiration to strike.
Just write every day.
Exactly. Even if it's just for a few minutes.
And eventually those actions will start to reshape how you see yourself
Yeah, like you're building evidence of your desired identity.
through your actions.
Exactly.
This is blowing my mind.
I know, right? It's really powerful stuff.
It is.
And it all comes back to those small changes.
Those atomic habits.
Exactly. Like it's not about overnight success.
It's about showing up every day.
and striving to be just 1% better.
I love that.
Me too. So as we wrap up this deep dive on atomic habits,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a question.
Okay, shoot.
What's one tiny change you could make today? That would make a big difference in your life a year from now.
Wow, that's a good one.
I know, right? So think about that.
I will.
And remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
You got this.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive,
It's been fun.
and we'll see you next time.
See ya.